What is up, YouTube? This is Hypergon, back again for another video. As you know, we're currently about a third of the way through the month of March, which means that this current format is about to end, and the new one will soon start, promptly April 1st. And of course, with every new format comes a new ban list. And naturally, everybody and their mothers in the Yu-Gi-Oh community is currently discussing what they think Konami's going to do for the next ban list. Naturally, I have my own ideas on what that is, and that's what we're going to talk about today. My current predictions for the April 2015 ban list. Now, let's just go ahead and get this out of the way. This video is sheerly my opinion. I don't claim to be a complete expert on the competitive scene of Yu-Gi-Oh! I just kind of play it for fun, but I do still know what is kind of considered broken in this game and what needs to be fixed. However, Konami is a little difficult to predict. We can't always tell when they're going to do something rational and when they're going to do something completely out of left field. So I've kind of broken this list up into two ways, and even then, one of those lists is again further divided into two parts. The first half is going to be what needs to come off the ban list, be that it goes from forbidden to limited, limited to semi-limited, or semi-limited to completely off the ban list, or whatever. And this is the one that's going to get kind of split up. Like I said, Konami's a little unpredictable, so I have two versions of this. I have my realistic version, which is what I think Konami might actually do, based on past experiences with ban lists and is what seems like the most logical choices. I also have an optimistic list. These are things that I do not think Konami is going to do, but that they should. But again, we'll see. Konami's pulled some weird ones out on us before. I don't think anyone predicted Raigeki or Snatch Steal. But after that, I'm going to be talking about what needs to go on the ban list. There's not as much for that, so I didn't really divide it up in terms of realistic or optimistic, but there is a mix in there, and I'll talk about which ones I think are more likely than not. So without any further without any further talking, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to first talk about what I think is most realistic to come off the ban list. And starting with the Forbidden list, we have one that people have been requesting for a long time. Past couple of formats, actually, people have really wanted this to come off, and that is the Dark Magician of Chaos. Now, for those of you who do not know, the Dark Magician of Chaos is a level 8 Dark Spellcaster. His effect is that when this card is normal or special summoned, you can target one spell card in your graveyard and add that target to your hand. Banish any monsters destroyed by battle with this card, and if this face-up card would leave the field, banish it instead. Now, back in the day, that was considerably broken, and to some extent still kind of is, but it's nowhere near as bad as it used to be. The main thing people would want this monster for is the first effect of bringing back one spell card from your graveyard. Konami already tried doing this a little more tamely with Magician of Faith, and that didn't do a thing. No one used it. So this may be a slightly better option for that, but I still don't see it being the biggest thing that could happen. I used to think that there was no way this card could come back because of its banishing effect. But Konami, in all their wisdom, decided to give us a monster that basically does the same thing, only 10 times worse. Dark Law. With cards like Dark Law, Macro, D-Fisher out there, DMC can do whatever he wants. It really doesn't matter. And given the past string of bizarre choices that they've made, I can see this one happening this time, honestly. Past times I couldn't see it, but with cards like Dark Law out now, I can totally see this happening. The next two cards kind of go hand in hand together, and are admittedly kind of a left field choice in my opinion, but not that left field. And those are Sangan and Witch of the Black Forest. These are some old school search cards, and even now they probably still wouldn't really hold up like they used to. Sangan, for those of you who don't know, searches out any monster in your deck when he is when he is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard. Any monster with 1500 or less attack points and adds it to your hand. And then the Witch of the Black Forest does the same thing, only for monsters with 1500 or less defense. Now, of the two, I think Sangan's a little more realistic than Witch of the Black Forest, but again, Konami's done some weird things before. The main reason I can see these coming off is because they're slow. I mean, yes, they're more generic than a lot of things like Giant Rat or Flying Kamakiri #1, who, well, in those cases they special summon, but point in case still being, they need to be destroyed first. And quite frankly, I still feel like cards like Giant Rat and Flying Kamakiri #1 are better because they can special summon it out. I mean, yeah, in some instances you would prefer the search over the special summon. I myself, as a Dragunigi player, would rather search Dux than special summon him, so I'm more prone to Sanga and things like Flying Kamakiri. So there is the necessity for them, but I still feel that they're slow enough that it wouldn't really make a big impact on the game. It would just kind of help some of the other decks out, but I wouldn't even see them being played that much. People thought Magician of Faith might do the same, and look what happened to her. That's pretty much it. Also, if we did get them back, Sandwich would actually be playable again. And who doesn't love generic fusions that can't be brought out with instant fusion? Am I right? Okay, moving on. Next up we have... yes, a classic. Tribe Infecting Virus. Now, for those of you who don't know how this works, and I can't blame you if you don't, it's kind of an oldie, it is a level 4 water aqua monster with 1600 attack and 1000 defense. Its effect states that you can discard one card from your hand and declare one type of monster, then destroy all face-up monsters of the declared type on the field. Now, normally that would be considered kinda much. However, if you look at how most archetypes work now, destruction isn't really going to make that big of an impact. Now, I'll admit, Volcanics did kind of debunk that as completely foolproof, but you need to look at this a little bit more realistically. We have cards like Raigeki back. This is essentially a weaker Raigeki, because it has to all be monsters of the same type. Now, admittedly, a lot of decks do focus on singular typings, but not... even then. It requires a discard from the hand, and in place of this, you could be running much better cards. You would have to use this in place of something like a Raigeki or a Darkhold, both of which do not care as to what the type is. Now, I know what you're saying. Well, most meta decks do run all cards of a singular type. Yeah, and most meta decks could care less about this card, quite honestly. Most of them could just beat over it with anything. And if you really want to look at it that way, let's take Shaddoll's for instance. Yeah, their main deck is all spellcasters, but their extra deck is a bunch of stuff. Raigeki can hit all of them. Tribe Infecting Virus cannot. Is it one I feel like likely will come back? Probably not. But, Konami surprised us before. It's not as left field as a lot of things. And finally, for cards coming off of the ban list, I can see Heavy Storm. I said this last time, I feel like it has a good chance of it. We need something to combat back row, especially with cards like Vanity's Emptiness, Skill Drain, all that just ridiculous back row. And for those saying, oh, there's no way they'll do that, it's just too good. Not necessarily. I can actually completely see it coming back. I mean, honestly, what top tier deck would really care? I mean, maybe Burning Abyss would probably, since it's more back row heavy. But if you look at something like Cleaforts and Necros, which don't really rely that much on back row, and even with Cleaforts, if their Pendulum Zones get destroyed, who cares? They just go to the extra deck and you can just re-special summon them again. They don't care. It's mostly the other decks that would be impacted by it, and let's face it, Konami and all their high horse glory don't care about the other decks. So they can probably bring back Heavy Storm with no issue. Now, just to clarify, every card I just listed that needs to come off of the Forbidden section should just go to Limited, so 1. And now with that, let's go ahead and move on to the Limited cards that I feel should come back to Semi-Limited, 2. Starting that off, we have Gladiator Beast Bestiari. This is one of those cards that has needed desperately to come off of the ban list for a long time, because it's one of the essential elements of Gladiator Beast. It's used to bring out one of their fusions, whose name presently escapes me, and it's a half-decent back row popper. You'd be better off with MSTs, but again, it's just a good option, and we do need some back row hate in this format. It's just, there's too much of it. Next up, and I'm going to need to explain this one quite a bit. Please do not leave the video upon hearing this, but, I think Infernity Barrier should come back to 2. Now, let me explain, please, please, please. Think back to when Infernities had their ever-lovable nickname of Unfairnities, where we had Archfiend at 3 and Barrier at 3. That was stupid, I'll openly admit that. So why would they bring Barrier back to 2? Because Archfiend's at 1. If they bring back Barrier, Archfiend needs to stay at 1. Otherwise, it will be broken and my argument is invalidated. But here's why it doesn't really matter. Let's think back to the glory days, if you will, of Infernities, where they did have 3 of each. The main issue with that was that you would summon out you would bring out your Archfiend, you would get your Search for Barrier, you would set that, stick on that for a turn, and then the next turn just explode everywhere and laugh at your opponent as they struggle to get past your onslaught of monsters and likely second and third Infernity barriers. So why can't we do this now? Because we have 1 Archfiend. You know what you're saying? Well, hold on, there's other Infernity monsters other than just Archfiend. Yeah, have you seen a typical Infernity deck? Okay, let's back up a bit. Let's actually look at what Infernity Barrier does. It requires no cards in your hand, typical of an Infernity card, and a face-up attack position Infernity monster. Most of the cards in an Infernity deck, specifically the Infernity monsters, do not fulfill that condition properly. Infernity Mirage, 0 attack points. Infernity Avenger, if you're running the Synchro variant, 0 attack points. Infernity Necromancer, 0 attack points. Plus, when he's summoned, he goes straight into defense mode, so he can't even fill that anyway. That really leaves 2 that you will run into in your typical Infernity deck. Archfiend, who is again at 1 and much harder to get out, and then Infernity Doomdragon, if you're running the Synchro variant, and you're not likely to see him. Why not? He's a half-decent card. There's better options! Void Ogre Dragon, he's a Shien, he negates stuff for having 0 cards in your hand. Hundred Eyes Dragon, he creates loops. And then if nothing else, Beals. Beals is honestly a better card than Doomdragon. I'm not saying Doomdragon's a bad card. I'm just saying he's really what you want if you need to get a big monster out there and the ability to use Infernity Barrier. But quite honestly, you'd be better off just getting Void Ogre, who does the same thing. If Archfiend were to come back to 2 or 3, yeah, there's no reason to bring back Barrier. But as it is right now, Barrier would not do a thing. And finally, for cards that need to go from limited to semi-limited, I have Torrential Tribute, because we need something to slow down pendulums and other just mass special summons. It's ridiculous how dumb these decks are. Necrons can just pull thousands of cards out their ass. Qliphorts, I don't even think I need to explain it. They're just pendulum summon everything, and it's ridiculous. I would prefer bottomless because that solves the issue, especially of pendulums, a lot better, but Konami's not going to do that. They're not going to do anything that could really hurt them. I mean, all Torrential Tribute would do to a Qliphort deck is slow it down. And that's really all that we need. It's just to kind of stop it for a turn and hope we can OTK them first. But that's really all I have for that, and that's actually it for the more realistic thing. I couldn't see anything on the semi-limited list that I felt needed to come off completely. So now we're moving on to something I think is going to be a little bit more interesting. My optimistic list. These are cards that I think need to come off that Konami is not likely to do. It's more of my Christmas wish list, if you will. So starting off with this, we are again going right back to the Forbidden section, cards that need to come back to 1. First off, we have the, how should I word this? The Savior of Heroes, the card that every hero player has been asking for since the new hero structure deck was announced. And that is Elemental Hero Stratos. Honestly, at this point, there's no real reason for him not to come back, especially now that we know Blazeman's going to be coming back in World Superstars in about a month or so. So I honestly don't see why they didn't do it last time, and this time I feel like they have no excuse not to do it. And even if they did, who cares? There is only one reason they want Stratos back, and that's so you can go into Great Tornado and Kamikaze. That's it. They just need a win monster other than Avian. And, I mean, yeah, he does get the search, but they already have so many searches. 3 Rhodas, 3 E-calls. It's absurd. And now they can do the same thing with Shadow Mist? That's 9 search cards. What's one more gonna do? What? One more. What's it gonna do? Nothing. Next up is kind of a wild card, and while it might happen, it's not too likely, and that would be Thousand Eyes Restrict. Now, I know what some people are saying. Oh, why would you say that? That card is ridiculous. We don't need another 101 or Wylon de Sigma. I haven't heard of that one in a while, have you? But, I don't know. I just feel like it could safely come back. For those of you who don't know, Thousand Eyes Restrict is a fusion monster who requires Relinquished and Thousand Eyes Idol. Relinquished is a ritual monster. Thousand Eyes Idol is worthless. It is a vanilla 1-star Ojama, basically. Well, Ojama stats, at least. It has 0 attack and 0 defense. Its effect is, other monsters cannot change their battle position or attack. Once per turn, you can equip 1 monster your opponent controls to this card, maximum of 1, and this card's attack and defense become the same as the equipped monsters. If this card would be destroyed by battle, the equipped monster is destroyed instead. Now, I'm sure that does sound a little excessive, but the way I see it, it's very temporary. So, there is the thing about preventing other monsters from attacking, okay, whatever. And then, yeah, you can take a monster. But in order to bring this thing out in any productive sense, you basically have to base a deck around it. Just something to get you Thousand Eyes Idol and Relinquished, and to fuse this thing into it. I mean, since it is a level 1, you could technically use Instant Fusion, but it's just going to destroy itself at the end of the turn. And while it can save itself from destruction, it's only destruction by battle. Card effect can still blow this thing up at any time, which means it will just die at Instant Fusion. The best practical use for this card is to summon it out, take an opponent's monster, and then have it die at the end of the turn so the opponent's monster just goes to the graveyard. It costs you 1,000 life points to do that. There's better ways of getting rid of monsters. This card would not do a thing, and I truly mean nothing at all. So that's my little rant on that. Next up, I think that Trishula really does need to come back. There's no point in it not coming back anymore. I get that it's good, and we've definitely seen the Necros version is ridiculous to deal with. And Trish is technically a little bit more workable since it doesn't... You can kind of do... It's an and/or instead of just an and, so you can kind of pick and choose which ones you want to get rid of. But the catch is he requires 1 tuner and 2 or more non-tuners. So it's not like most synchro decks can really get him out easily. Most synchro decks typically revolve around 1 tuner and 1 non-tuner to get out their synchro monsters. There are some exceptions to that. I'm sure Synchrons can probably do pretty well with him. But most Synchrons are honestly going to want to go for something like a Shooting Quasar Dragon as opposed to a Trishula. It just... I don't know. I just feel like it would be a good idea to bring it back. It's not going to change anything, really. And it'd just be kind of cool to have it back. Its time is gone. We moved on to the ritual version of him, which is just infinitely easier to get out. Next up, I have Wind-Up Carrier Zenmagi. Wind-Ups have not done a thing in the longest time. And while this card can kind of loop a little bit, it's not that big of a deal, really. With Magician still... Is it banned or at 1? I honestly can't remember at this point, but with Magician hit, it's not going to make that big of a difference. There's still enough of a hit on this deck, but it's become irrelevant. It really does not matter. But yeah, they just kind of need the push. It's not going to hurt anyone if it comes back. And neither would Dragon Ravine, which is also kind of on my little optimistic thing. I'm perfectly aware this is my own bias on that I think Dragunities are my personal favorite. I play the deck religiously, so it would make sense I want this back. Just some search, but I don't feel as strongly about it. Just as long as at some point we get Harpy's Harpist. It's just something to search ducks. That's all we need, really. I'll take the Sangan if that's what it takes, but preferably Ravine. The Dragon Rulers are gone. They're not going to come back and abuse it anymore. And even if they do, who cares? We're past Dragon Ruler format. They can be crushed now. If they only get back 1 Ravine, they're just going to have 1 of each. a ravine, maybe some terraformings to search it out, and a sacred sword of 7 stars. Then just a bunch of other stuff, which would make up about 3/4 of the deck. So it doesn't make a difference if it comes back. I've already made a video on this rant, so you can just check that out if you need to. And then finally, I think Solemn Judgment can afford to come back. We have so many other cards like this that it doesn't make a difference. Infernities have theirs, Senju have theirs, most other archetypes have some version of this. Plants have one of these, come on. There's no reason we can't just have a generic one, and the cost is kind of big, especially early game, in paying half of your life points. I get that this can kind of be what saves you from like a big, game-changing play later on if you don't have as many life points to spare, but early on, that is at least 4,000 life points you're paying, and that is huge. I really don't see why this card can't come back, especially with how many times that we could use a good negate. I can't tell you how many times I wish I had like a judgment or something so I can get rid of a Vanity's Emptiness. It needs to go away. Or come back, rather, I'm sorry. Next up, we're going on to my limited to unlimited section. And this one's gonna this first one's gonna contradict what I said earlier and probably piss off a lot of people. But hey, like I said, this is my opinion, and I want Archfiend back to 2. Yes, Infernity Archfiend back to 2. I realize what I said. I know it's a terrible idea. I know a lot of people do not like Infernities, but I love Infernities. I would love to see them get a second Archfiend back. Just something to kind of help them, get out of the grave. Not bring it back to 3. I don't think that's necessary. I'm willing to take a step back and realize that the deck was broken. It was topping way past its time, and so I'll openly admit that it deserved the hit, but I feel like it needs something. We can bring this out of obscurity. It's not going to make that big of a difference, realistically. But that's just my hopes on that. I realize that is incredibly biased and probably not going to happen, but again, this is me being optimistic here. Next up, I feel like Neospatian Grandmole should probably come back to 2. What difference is he going to make? He kind of helps get past some bigger monsters, like, I can't even do it. Star Eater, actually, I take that back. Well, he can mostly just help out get past some big monsters. It's just a good thing to have, and at 1, he's not really doing anything. At 2, he can make a little bit more of a difference, but realistically, it's not that big of a deal. You can get around that. Just Trishula. Problem solved right there. Last card that I think needs to go from limited to semi-limited is Macrocosmos and D-Fisher. Either or, I would prefer them both, quite honestly, because while I don't use them personally, and I hate to have them played against me, we need something to calm down the bigger decks. Just, it shuts down so many decks because there's so much graveyard reliance now. It's just... It needs to come back to kind of help bring some balance to it. I realize that it may kind of bring back the anti-meta format, but at the same time, we needed to tame the bigger decks. We really do. Last but not least, for my optimistic section, I have one card from the semi-limited list that needs to come back to 3. Hieratic Seal of Convocation. Why is this still at 2? What difference does it realistically make? I honestly don't get it. Hieratics haven't done anything for a long time. I get that they're a great engine for a lot of decks, but what have they done recently that's honestly made a difference? I feel like we can safely go, just give them their 3 searches. It's not going to make a big difference. So that's it for cards that I think need to come off the ban list. Now we're moving on to cards that I think need to go on the ban list. And this one, like I said, it's a lot shorter than the previous one, and I'll try and explain which ones I think are more realistic than non-realistic, since I didn't really do a divide for this one. But starting things off, similarly to how I felt the last format, Vanity's Emptiness needs to get hit. I don't understand why we have to have a staple Floodgate card. I feel sickened that I can say that. A staple Floodgate? Are you serious? We need to do something about this. It's getting a little ridiculous. It wasn't as bad before when it was pretty much just all the competitive people who could, just throw hundreds of thousands of dollars into a deck just for the sake of winning. And this is back when Vanity's Emptiness was like $30. Vanity's Emptiness is like $5 now. It's accessible to everyone. It's not just the people who are willing to spend a lot of money. Back in the day, i.e. last format, Vanity's Emptiness, if you wanted to playset them, you had to basically spend $100 on a playset. Now, you can honestly get a playset of these things for half the cost of one of them. It's way, way more accessible. I'm honestly surprised I haven't gotten any, to be completely honest, but I really just hate this card. I'm not saying ban it, but at least to one or two, so limited or semi-limited, either one. I would prefer limited, but again, I just want this thing hit in some way, shape, or form. Everything else I have on here is honestly more based on what decks are presently meta. And I realize that Konami and all their glory is not going to hit a meta deck. Especially not the newer ones. Not directly, at least. So what I've kind of done for this is I've separated this into cards that at first I'm going to do ones within the archetype that if for some reason they were to hit, they would. Or should, rather. And then cards outside of the archetype that could more than likely get hit if they wanted to kind of tame them a little bit. First off, we're going to look at the newest addition to the meta, and that is Necroz. Now, I'm aware that there are several problem cards with this. You got Trish, Brio, you could arguably say Decisive Armor is kind of a bit of a pain in the ass. Kaleidomir, there's a lot of things, but they're not going to touch any of them. I know that. Even optimistically, that's way out there. If they were to hit anything directly within the Necroz archetype, I could see Unicorn. Unicorn, for those of you who don't know, when he's out on the field, prevents the opponent from special summoning monsters from the extra deck. So, kind of a more limited Vanity's Emptiness, if you will, but still kind of a problem since he's just a level 4 ritual monster. And most of these decks are running at least one Denko Sekka. Plus you have Sanju and Menju, which are also level 4s. And then you have the one Necroz monster who counts as the entire tribute for it. Plus if you have Kaleidomir, you can just use the Herald of the Arclight and do it that way. Plus get a search. For me, Unicorn is just too easy to get out and he slows down the opponent way too much. Again, limited or semi-limited, but I don't even see them touching it. It's just, if they were to hit something within Necroz this early on, that would be the most likely one. But as for the more realistic cards to hit, the first one I could see would be Rhoda, or Reinforcement of the Army. Just because this deck is all about search power, and Rhoda can grab either Caius, or is it? Callus, I'm sorry. And as well as that other one that I mentioned that can serve as the entire tribute. Both of which are level 3 warriors, so they're definitely within the range of Rhoda. And Caius or whatever the hell his name is, can be used to search out a ritual spell. So you can use Rhoda to search out a spell, basically, or you can use it to search out your tribute. Plus, with heroes out now, I know the hero hype's kind of died down a little bit, but Shadow Mist is still a thing. He's still being used as a common tech just so we can get Darklaw. So it's just a little something to kind of hit two somewhat problem cards. And I could just see them putting it at 2. They're not going to hit it too hard. There's no reason to, because there's so many warrior decks that really aren't an issue, but still rely on Rhoda. So putting it to 2 wouldn't hurt. And plus it wouldn't be the first time Konami's hit Rhoda, so there's that. Finally, for Necroz, the one that I can see and want to see hit the most. Preparation of Rites. It is ridiculous what this card can do. Those of you who don't know, Preparation of Rites, it searches out a level 7 or lower ritual monster from your deck and adds it to your hand, and then lets you recycle a ritual spell from your graveyard and add that back to your hand. That's way too good. I'm sorry, but with how quickly, especially Necroz, can go through these things and still have searches left in the deck, that card is just way too good. It needs to go down, like, limited down. I'm tired of seeing this card. Please, get rid of it. Now. That's all I got for Necros. Next up is the Burning Abyss archetype. Everyone's been saying this for the longest time, and I agree, Fire Lake needs to go. Down to 1, or just outright ban it. It's way too good. It can build up so much advantage and just cripple your opponent at the same time for no real cost. I know that some people might, not many, would argue that, oh, well, no, you have to discard for that. Yeah, in other words, trigger effects. You plus like no one's business off this, and it's annoying to have to deal with it. If anything within the archetype, that's what needs to get hit. Another thing I can see within the archetype would be Skarm, just because he's so easily abusable. His searching is ridiculous. Just discard, like, just summon Tour Guide, get Skarm, go into Dante, detach Skarm for Dante effect, end phase, get second Tour Guide so you can do it all over again. It is ridiculous how good that card is. But more than Skarm, just because, you know, he's a decent searcher, I can see Tour Guide also getting hit. Both of them, Skarm and Tour Guide, I can see going to 2, just because it wouldn't cripple the decks, it would just kind of slow them down, and that's really what the purpose of a ban list is to kind of slow down the bigger decks. At least a proper one is, just kind of make it so it's a fair and balanced game. That's really what I can see with the Burning Abyss archetype. Next is Cleaforts, and I have just 2 things for this. First, within the archetype, Cleafort Scout. Everyone knows why that's a problem. He's just such a good search. He searches the deck. He literally just searches out the deck. And so for that reason, I can easily see him getting limited to 1. I mean, he needs some kind of a hit, but Konami's not going to do that. What they might do, and again, I still doubt this because Cleaforts are still a big cash cow for them, is they might hit Summoner's Art. If they were to, I'd like to see it either go to 1 or just get outright banned. Because it searches their searcher. It literally just searches the card that searches through the deck. Or, now with Monolith being a thing, it can search out their draw power. It's just, those 2 cards are really the issue with the deck. I have no real issue with it otherwise. It's still kind of a ridiculous concept, but it's at least slower, which is really the issue. On the off chance that a Cleafort deck bricks, they're easy to get past. And if you kind of limit their searching options, that's somewhat more likely. Not likely. I've maybe seen a Cleafort player brick once. And I've fought quite a few Cleafort players. Trust me. That's just what I can see for them. Finally, they're not really where they used to be. I would say they're definitely not like tier 0.5 or tier 1. Maybe tier 2 now. Shaddolls. They're still good, but they're very easily overshadowed by the other 3 I just listed. And if they were to get hit in any way, I can't really see anything outside the archetype because they already hit Super Poly, which I don't really feel was necessary, but I can't really argue with it. The only ones I can see are El Shaddoll Winda and Shaddoll Fusion, both going to 1. The reason for that is Winda is just... it's a floodgate. I'm sick of how many floodgates there are in this game. It's ridiculous. It's not even like the idea... the game used to be where you would just summon monsters and try and outclass your opponent with better monsters. Now it's, let me summon some monsters and make sure you can't do anything. And it's stupid. That's the issue most people have with Exodia decks, is that it's just solitaire and you're not even getting to play. That's what these floodgate cards do. They make it so you can't play. What's the point? So, I want to see basically every floodgate card get hit in some way, shape, or form. And my reasoning for Shaddoll Fusion is because, to me, it's too good of a fusion card. I mean, the fact that it can just pull out from the deck the cards that you need, and that when these cards go to the graveyard for this fusion summon, they get off their effect, is just... it's about Fire Lake levels of stupid. Not quite there, just because it does need that trigger of having a monster from the extra deck, but unless you're facing, like, Necros or Cleaforts, that's not going to be an issue. Even Burning Abyss, which is another tier deck, is almost bound to have some sort of an Xyz monster or a Virgil or whatever first turn. It's almost guaranteed you'll see that, so you can quite easily use your Shaddoll Fusion first turn. And it's just, I don't know, I just feel like it's too much in the realm of just being able to access that. If their fusions weren't so vastly overpowered, I wouldn't have an issue with it, but most of them are just ridiculously good. But, again, I can't really see Shaddolls getting hit as much. Oh, actually, of them, they probably are the most likely, but I still doubt it just because now the moment's kind of gone. It doesn't matter as much. But if they were to, I could definitely see them hitting those particular Shaddol cards. And that's about it. That's everything I feel like should get hit or get taken off. Let me know what you guys think down below. Did I do a good job predicting? Is some of my predictions, like, say, Archfiend absolute bullcrap? Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments section. And, of course, don't forget to also subscribe and like this video. And until next time, peace.